Hello everyone, welcome to session 11 of ISTQB training CTFL. I hope all of you are well. So just to recap what we did last week, last session we finished maintenance testing, then we started module 3 static testing, and in static testing we covered two topics which were work products that can be examined by static testing, and also we went through the benefits of static testing. So today we will continue with the rest of the static testing topic, and today my aim will be to finish this module, but still there is a lot to cover, so we will see that how much we can cover in today's session. And as usual, if there are any questions, just feel free to post your question anytime in Q&A window. Okay, to start with, differences between static and dynamic testing. So by now we are clear of the concept of testing, static testing and dynamic testing. And now we will go through some high level differences of these two type of testings. Before we start doing that, there are a few points which we need to remember. First of all, same objective. Whether it's static or dynamic testing, the objectives for both testing are the same. The objective is to provide an assessment of the quality of the work products and identify defects as early as possible. So yes, the type of testings are different, but at the end, the objective is the same. Different type of defects complement each other by finding different defects. So the type of defects we found in static testing and during dynamic testing, they are different, but they complement each other. Because if we are finding few defects in static testing, then it helps us to focus only on the other areas during dynamic testing. Otherwise, if static testing is not done properly, then during dynamic testing, you have to go back and repeat lots of things which were supposed to be covered in static testing. Same goes for dynamic testing. In static testing, when you know that most of the functional and non-functional aspects will be covered in dynamic, then you can focus more on the review side in static. So they go hand in hand and help each other. So let's go through some differences, high-level differences of static and dynamic testing. Static testing is done without executing the code. So it includes walkthroughs, inspections, reviews of different work products. And dynamic testing is basically done by executing the code. So the functional testing or non-functional testing, it comes under dynamic testing. Static testing covers the verification part of the software, while dynamic testing covers the validation part. We can also say that static testing is more of like a prevention of defects, and while dynamic testing is more cure, that we find the defects which are functional, which are already been introduced in the code, and then we get them fixed. Static testing improve the consistency and internal quality of work products. So as it's done in the early stages of the project, so if we identify those issues earlier, then we can make sure that the project is consistent, the quality is consistent of all the work products. In dynamic testing, focus is more on externally visible behavior because it's more focused on the functionality of the system. So if we are testing any project, then we are more focusing on the UI, etc., those kind of aspects, just to make sure that the project is doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, so now we'll go through some types of defects which can be identified during static testing, and we'll also go through their examples as well. So first of all, in requirements. So in requirements, we can identify these kind of defects like inconsistencies, if there are any ambiguities in the requirements, if there are any contradictions in the requirements, like if there are two different kind of requirement documents and at one place there is one specific requirement, but at the other one it's contradicting what it said earlier, or if there are any omissions or something which was earlier over there in the required in the requirements, but then it was taken out or it was excluded for some reason, if there are any kind of inaccuracies, or if there are any redundancies, like if there is any duplication of the same requirements. So these kind of defects can be identified in static testing. Next is design. So in design, it's inefficient algorithms or database structures. So because in design, we do have access to any kind of schema of database. And so we can go through any kind of algorithms or the DB structures. And if we find any ambiguity, any issue over there, then we can identify during static testing. Then it's high coupling and low cohesion. So you don't need to go into much detail as part of this syllabus of what is high coupling and low cohesion, but I thought that it will be useful if you are aware of these concepts as well. So I'll explain you these concepts and then we will come back to this slide. So high coupling looks something like this. So when we talk about coupling, coupling means that how much modules depend on each other. So ideally, they should be as much independent as possible so that any change in one module does not impact other modules, because that's the purpose of having modules, that if there is one set of functionality, then we just package it in one module and the other set of functionalities packaged in another module. So high coupling is not a good practice. As you can see in this diagram, that module A is dependent on module D, B, C. So all modules are coupled, are highly coupled together, which is not a good practice. And we can identify static defects during static testing if there is any kind of dependency like this between the modules. On the other hand, low cohesive. What is low cohesive? That so cohesion is that how elements within one module are related to each other. So we know that a module is a set of one functionality. For example, over here, I've taken example of login functionality. So if you see that there are the elements, the functions under this functionality is username, password, payments, forgot password. So over here, you can see when we think about the login functionality, username, password, forgot password, these functionalities relate to this function. But when we talk about payments, it doesn't have to do anything with the login module. So it doesn't need to be here. It can be somewhere else in the maybe payments module, payments functionality. So high coupling and low cohesive is not a good coding practice, and these kind of defects can only be found during static testing. In dynamic testing, we can't find these kind of defects. So I hope that the concept of high coupling and low cohesion is now clear. In coding, so when we are doing static testing of the code, we can identify few issues like variables with undefined values, or variables that are declared but never used, unreachable code, duplicate code. So why these things are a problem? Because if we are having some variables defined or code which are not used, then they just occupy the memory space. And this is not good for the capacity. So it's not good for the performance of the system. So for this one, unreachable code, I have a diagram which will be easy to understand. So if we have a function here, which basically adds, and we have two variables here, two parameters for this function, A and B. So what this function is doing, as the name says, it adds these two variables and it returns A plus B, which makes sense. But at the same place, the next line says integer c is equal to a multiplied by b. So over here, we are declaring this new variable c integer, and then this is equal to a multiplied by b, but it's this is not used in this function. This will never be used because this function is only about adding these variables, not about multiplication. So this is an example of unreachable code. So it's just occupying some space. It's not doing anything. This will never be called. Okay, so some more types of defects: deviation from standards, lack of adherence to coding standards. So if we have, so whenever we are writing any code, we do have some coding standards. Every organization, they have their own coding standards. Some of them, they just use the best practices which are used in the industries, or some of them, they just modify their some of them and write their own coding standards. So if there is anything which is not defined, which is not done as per those standards, then it's deviation. For example, how the variables will be declared and how the comments will be written, etc. How will be the how the functions will be called, and which will be the method name will be in caps or lowercase or proper case. Those kind of things all are part of coding standards. Next is incorrect interface specifications. Different units of measurements used by the calling system than the called system. So if we have two systems, and in one system they both are dependent on each other, and in one system, let's say that we have a metric as if there is a temperature metric, so we are using Celsius, while in the other one we are calling that system, but we are using Fahrenheit as a metric. So it's conflicting with each other. Then it's security vulnerabilities, susceptibility to buffer overflows. Okay, so first of all, let's just see that what is a buffer overflow. Buffers are basically memory storage that temporarily hold data when it is being transferred from one location to another. So a buffer overflow happens when the volume of data, it exceeds the capacity of the memory. So for example, if we have login functionality and we have a username field, and its storage capacity is only, let's say, 8 characters, whatever the memory is allocated to that, and then more can be added to that, then it's like buffer overflow. So what happens that it results the program attempting to write data to the buffer, and it overrides the adjacent memory locations, which then can result in a memory crash, etc. Also, why it's a security vulnerability, because most of the hackers, they use this technique to insert the code they want to, and in order to access most of the systems. So this is very important to take care of from the IT security perspective. Okay, then the next one is gaps or inaccuracies in test bases, traceability, or coverage. So test bases, as we already know, are the requirements. So missing tests for an acceptance criteria. So if we have a requirement and we have an acceptance criteria mentioned in that requirement, but we don't have any test against that. So of course, then it's there are gaps in the traceability or the test coverage. The last point over here is maintainability. So in maintainability, uh, what what are the examples? Improper modularization, as we already covered, that how the modules needs to be independent of each other wherever possible. poor reusability of components, code that is difficult to analyze and modify without introducing new defects. So in the last session, we covered maintenance testing, and we also understood that what's the importance of the maintainability of the code. So that's why it's really important that this kind of testing is done, and this is taken care of while writing the code. And these are all the type of defects which can be found only in static testing. Okay, so the next topic is review process. So we are still in static testing, but the topic is review process. So let's first see the definition of review. Review is a type of static testing in which a work product or process is evaluated by one or more individuals to detect defects or to provide improvements. There are two main categories of review: formal review and informal review. So informal review, there is a team set of few main roles. Maybe let's say if there's a team of a project manager, maybe a developer, code, who's writing the code, tester, BA, or any other person. So there's a team who participates, and they have a proper review session in which they document all, they discuss all the requirements, and then they document the results of the review. And then based on that, if someone is conducting a review, then all the logs are maintained, etc. So that's why it's called formal review. So most of the times, if we are doing any kind of waterfall project, then because the requirements are already defined and stable and it's a long project, so mostly formal review is done for those kind of SDLC model. On the other hand, informal review, it doesn't follow a defined process, and hence it's known as informal, and it doesn't have formal documented output. Agile iterative model is a very good example of informal review, because requirements are keep on changing so frequently that we don't have a defined process, and we can't document all the requirements up front, because the requirements, it evolves as the system is being developed. So informal review is a technique which is mostly used for agile projects. Okay, so now we'll see that for reviewing the process, what are the factors? So first of the factor is SDLC model. As we just mentioned, that depending on what kind of SDLC model we are using, we can identify that what kind of review process we need to use, whether it's formal or informal. The next one is maturity of the development process. So you must have heard of CMMI, capability maturity model integration. So maturity is basically that in any organization, how mature the development process is, and why it's an important factor, because let's say if the development process is mature enough, then we know that what kind of review process we should follow, and how applicable it would be, if let's say if there is and we learn it from the maturity of like the review process for one project, and maybe we don't repeat the same mistakes in the next project. So gradually the maturity of the development process keeps on increasing if we have any set procedures in place. Then the third one is complexity of the work product to be reviewed. So for example, if we have a set of code which is very complex, then we might decide to do a formal review, because the nature of that work product. So it can be like any work product. I've just given an example of the code, but depending on whatever the work product is, how complex it is, we can decide that whether it require a formal review or not. Then legal or regulatory requirements. So the same goes for any kind of standard which we are following. We need to make sure that we are compliant to that, and maybe in that case a formal review might be a better option. The last one is need for an audit trail. Okay, so there are certain aspects of the project for which we do require some audit trail, means some documentation which we can use for auditing purposes later on. Depending on what kind of work product which we need for auditing, uh, that can decide that whether we need a formal review or an informal review. So these are the factors for review process. Next one is now the focus of review. So we have covered that there are two kinds of review processes. Then we also went through the factors. Now we will go through the focus of review, that now this activity of review, what it focus on. So it focus on these four things. First of all, finding defects, because that's the purpose we are fulfilling in static testing. We have to identify defects in whatever the work products we are reviewing. Then Madhuri, do you have any question? Yeah, Madhuri, if you have any question, please write it in the Q&A section. All right. Okay. Sorry. I thought that I saw that you raised hand. So that's why I asked. Okay. So let's continue. Second one is gaining understanding. So first one was that finding defects. Next one, to gain the understanding that it's whoever is doing the review, whether it's a formal review or informal review, we need to understand the scope, that what are we trying to review. Let's say if it's the requirement document, then we do need to understand that what the requirements are about. If it's about an application, then we do need to understand. So that's why gaining understanding is important. The third one is educating participants such as testers and new team members. So if we are doing a review process, either informal or formal, then it's important to include all the team members. And as I said, that in agile projects, mostly it's informal review which is being done. That's why all the team members, they work closely with each other, because there are no formal documentations. So that's why it's really important that they are working close to each other, so that they understand each other's perspectives. And the last one is discussing and deciding by consensus. So again, then if everyone is working together with each other, they are sharing their viewpoints, and then they are discussing their concerns. There can be some conflicts as well between the team members, but at the end, then they are agreeing on the same thing. So they are deciding things by consensus. So these are the focus of review. Okay, so if we, so there are more details about the review roles and review techniques in this ISO standard, ISO IEC 20246. It includes description of review process for work products. So for this exam, you need to remember this ISO number, that 20246 is about the review process of work products. Then the next section is work product review process. So now we need to go through that whatever kind of review we are doing, what is the review process, and it has these set of activities in a specific order. Over here, planning, initiate review. So of course, first of all, planning is done, that when the review would take place, then initiate review. So review process starts over here. Then individual review. Individual review, that let's say that maybe there is one person who is doing the review in that team for a specific work product. Issue communication and analysis. So that individual, when the review is done, then that individual is communicating any kind of issues which are being identified as part of the review, and then analysis is done, and then if it needs fixing, then they are fixed, and then the reports are generated. So this is a review process, and now each of the attribute, each of the step we will go through in detail. Okay, so now from this point until the end of static testing is more of, there's a lot of theory. As you can see that we will go through each and every one, but they are more theory based, which you have to memorize for the exam because questions will come from this. So we'll try to go through it quickly, but if you have any issue, if there is something which is not clear, then just let me know, and we can discuss that in detail. Okay, so the first one is planning. So what are we doing in planning? We define the scope, which includes the purpose of review, that why we are even doing this review, what does or parts of the documents we need to review, and which quality characteristics need to be evaluated. Then we also estimate the effort and time frame that for this review activity, when it needs to be done and how much time needs to be allocated for this activity. Then identifying review characteristics, that what characteristics actually we are reviewing as part of this process. Then selecting the people to participate in the review and allocating roles. So later on today, we will go through the roles as well in detail, but in the planning section, we identify that who will be the participants of this process and which roles will they be performing. Defining the entry and exit criteria for more formal review types, for example, inspections. So we will cover this in more review types as well. But entry and exit criteria, I hope that you are familiar with these concepts. So entry criteria for anything is that what are the prereqs to enter in that specific whatever the work product is. For example, if you're talking about test planning, then if it's a test plan, we do mention entry and exit criteria, that what is the entry criteria for testing to begin. So we can say that the prereqs can be that the development is done, or the code is stable, or the requirements are stable, or the requirements are signed off, we have a test environment. So whatever applies to the entry criteria of the testing of that project, we identify in the test plan. So that's the entry criteria. The same is for exit criteria, that we mentioned that what would be the criteria where we can exit from the testing activity. Like we can say that there are no high or critical bugs in the system, and the test coverage is complete, or maybe all the high risk tests are executed. So that can be part of exit criteria. So this is just an example of entry and exit criteria, but in this case, it's the entry and exit criteria for more formal review types. The last one is checking that entry criteria are met for more formal review types. So yes, as we said over here, it's like defining, and over here checking that that criteria has been met. Next one is initiate review. So we are done with planning, and now we are starting the review process. So over here, distributing the work product. So whatever the products we are reviewing, those are distributed physically or by electronic means and other materials such as issue log forms, checklist, and related work products. So if there is a formal review, then usually there are checklists or the log forms or other kinds of documents which needs where the logs are being maintained. So when we are initiating the review process, then we distribute these kind of materials. Explaining the scope, objectives, process, roles, and work products to the participants. And third one, answering any questions that participants may have about the review. So as we are initiating the review, so this is a place where we just make sure that everyone is aware of that what's the scope, why we are even doing this review, who will be doing it, what will be the process, which work products will be reviewed. If there is any confusion, any questions from any participant, then this is the time to ask those questions. The third one is individual review, reviewing all or part of the work product. So whoever is taking part in the review, whoever is performing the review will either be whether they have to review the entire work product or partially or maybe a specific part, and noting potential defects, recommendations, and questions. That if they identify any kind of issues, then they note it down, and if they have any questions, if there is any kind of ambiguity which they have come across during the review process, then they can make a note of that as well. Next is issue communication and analysis. So in the last one, we read that if there are any defects, then those will be noted. And if there are any questions, of course, those will be noted as well. So over here now, all those noted defects, questions, recommendations, etc., are now being communicated. So communicating identified potential defects, for example, in a review meeting. So after the review is done, then there will be a review meeting in which all the defects or questions are communicated, and then analysis is done. So analyzing potential defects, assigning ownership and status to them. So in that review meeting, then all the identified defects can be discussed, and it can be analyzed at whether they are high priority bugs or low priority, and whether we need to get them fixed, or who will be doing those defects. Maybe in that meeting, then those defects will be assigned to someone, so that by the end of the meeting, we know that who will be working on those defects, and they are not just they are not unassigned. Evaluating and documenting quality characteristics. So whatever the quality characteristics which we are supposed to evaluate as part of review of that work products, that needs to be documented and evaluated, that whether it's serving the purpose or not. The last one is evaluating the review findings against the exit criteria to make a review decision. As I already mentioned, that based on the exit criteria, etc., whether we need to reject or accept. So maybe if there are major changes needed, then maybe we just reject that, or maybe accept that possibly with minor changes, that yes, fine, we can accept these minor changes and we can accept and go ahead. The last one is fixing and reporting. Creating defect reports for those findings that require changes to a work product. So over here, as we said, that when we will review all the findings, all the defects, then we might reject few of them and we might accept few of them. So the ones which are accepted, then after that, those defect reports are being created so that we have a log of them somewhere, and then they are assigned to someone who will be fixing those defects. Fixing defects found, typically done by the author in the work product reviewed. So we will go through the roles in a while. So then we will understand the role of author in more detail. The third one is communicating defects to the appropriate person or team when found in a work product related to the work product reviewed. Next one is recording updated status of defects in formal reviews, potentially including the agreement of the comment originator. So it's similar to the way when we find any defect while we are doing dynamic testing, and we have a place where any kind of tool or maybe Excel spreadsheet where we are recording all the defects and also then updating the status as well. So same goes over here as well. Then gathering metrics for more formal review types. Gathering metrics that like how many defects were found and how many are fixed, and the ones which are not fixed, are they what's the severity of those defects, etc. Then checking that exit criteria are met, accepting the work product when the exit criteria are reached, and with this our review process ends. Okay, so now we are done with the review process, and now we will discuss roles. So in previous slides, we did mention roles, participants. So each participant can have a different role, and there are few review types in which few roles are mandatory and the other one can be optional. So we'll go through that as well. But the main roles are these ones: author, management, facilitator, it's also called moderator, review leader, reviewers, scribe, or recorder. So now let's go in each of them in detail. Author creates the work product under review, fixes defects in the work product under review if necessary. Okay, so author, who you can relate it to be, maybe a business analyst who is writing the requirements. And because business analyst is the author of, let's say, that work product, who is writing the requirements. So over here, we are taking example of requirements as a work product. Author will be business analyst. And if there are any issues identified in the requirements, then the author, the business analyst, will fix the defects in the work product which is under review. So this is the role of author. Management. Management is responsible for review planning, decides on the execution of reviews, assigns staff, budget, and time, monitors ongoing cost effectiveness, executes control decisions in the event of inadequate outcomes. So as the name says, management, if we think of a project, then the role of project manager is something which has all these responsibilities. So maybe a person who is project manager, maybe a product owner as well, depending on the team structure. Then maybe person who is managing will have all these responsibilities. The third one is facilitator or moderator. Ensures effective running of review meetings when held, mediates if necessary between the various points of view, is often the person upon whom the success of review depends. Okay, so it can be anyone in the team, but let's say if we think about an agile project, then the role of Scrum Master, that that relates quite closely to this facilitator role, because anyone who is acting as Scrum Master in the team is basically running all these sprints, meetings, etc., and also making sure that the backlog grooming, etc., meeting is there, everyone is reviewing, and if there is any kind of uh, mediation needed, then that's the person. So it's just an example, but it can be anyone, any other role can be the facilitator, moderator as well. That's why over here, the name of roles and responsibilities are given. The next role is review leader. Takes overall responsibility for the review, decides who will be involved, and organizes when and where it will take place. So someone needs to take up this role when a review process is being done, because someone needs to lead that process, and it can be anyone in the team. So anyone who is the participant from the participants can be chosen as the review leader so that they can perform these activities. Then it's reviewers, that may be subject matter experts like who will be reviewing it. So it can be any SME who is basically, can be someone who is working on the project, who knows more about that project, who has more domain knowledge, maybe stakeholders who are actually bringing all the requirements with an interest in the work product. So if stakeholders are defining the requirements, then of course they will be the reviewer, and or individual specific technical or business backgrounds. So if we have a specific work product which need any technical expertise, then it makes more sense to have that person in the team as a reviewer. And there can be multiple reviewers as well, maybe from different perspectives, one from business side, one from technical side, etc. Then identify potential defects in the work product under review. So reviewer will be the one who will identify the defect and then log them as well. May represent different perspectives, for example, tester, developer, user, operator, business analyst, usability expert, etc. So as I said, there can be multiple reviewers because each of them might be testing, reviewing the work product from their own perspective. So depending on what kind of work product is being reviewed, then reviewers are chosen accordingly. And the last one is scribe or recorder. So usually in simple ways, who is scribe is like if we are having a meeting and someone who is taking the minutes of meetings, then that person is the scribe because that person is noting down the minutes of meetings. So in the review process, scribe collates potential defects found during the individual review activity and records new potential defects, open points, and decisions from the review meeting when held. So when we identify the defects, when they are discussed, they're analyzed, and we agree that these are the defects which we will be going to fix, then someone needs to take the responsibility of writing them down and in the system, whatever the system you are using. So basically, scribe or recorder is the person who perform these kind of activities. So with this, then we are done with all the roles of the review. Now we will be going through the review types that there are. So we said that we have two main types, formal review and informal review. And now we will go through in further detail. But first of all, the review types, what review type is based on. So it's based on the need of the project, that what are the requirements, what's the objective of that project. So that would be based on the needs of the project, available resources, product type, and risks. So what kind of risks are associated with that kind of project. Then business domain and company culture. So these are all the factors which decides that what kind of review type will be done. So now we will go through all the type of reviews and what are the attributes which are associated with them. So earlier we did a very high level, informal and formal, and now we will split them into further detail. Then over here we have informal review, which is also known as buddy check, pairing, peer review. So the main purpose of informal review is detecting potential defects. Then the possible additional purposes would be generating new ideas or solutions, quickly solving minor problems. So first of all, in informal review, we have to identify the potential defects. But then while going through the informal review, maybe new ideas can be generated as well as part of that review, or if there are any solutions or a better way of doing that project, maybe. So those can be an additional purpose of informal review. It's not based on a formal process, which we already know, may not involve a review meeting. So in informal review, we don't have to set up a formal review meeting. It can be performed by a colleague of the author, buddy check, or by more people. So anyone can do that review agreed in the team, but there's no formal process for that. Results may be documented. So it's not said that it will be results will have to be documented. Of course, it will be good to document the results, but it may be documented, or maybe if it's documented, then maybe it's not in a very formal way. So whatever the management tool is being used, maybe they are just logging over there. Varies in usefulness depending on the reviewers. So it depends that who is doing that informal review. So it because different roles can do the informal review. So depending on the role of that reviewer, it varies that whether that informal review is useful or not. Use of checklist is optional. So we'll go through it in a short while, that where we usually use checklist, but in informal review, we don't use any kind of checklist. It's very commonly used in agile development. So this is, we already covered that mostly informal reviews are done in agile models. The next one is walkthrough. So walkthrough is, the main purpose of walkthrough is find defects, improve the software product, consider alternative implementations, evaluate conformance to the standards and specifications. So walkthrough is that whatever the work product is, just go through it. And then if you find any defects, then identify that. And if there is any evaluation which needs to be done for conformance to standards and specification, that can be done through a walkthrough. Possible additional purposes: exchanging ideas about techniques or style variations, training of participants, and achieving consensus. So in a walkthrough, then ideas can be exchanged, discussion will be done, and if there is any kind of training which can be required, then that can be identified. And then if any kind of course, ideas are exchanged, then there will be a debate on that, and then few things will be finalized based on the discussions. Individual preparation before the review meeting is optional. Individual preparation means that whoever the individual who will be doing the review or the walkthrough in this case, there are no prereqs for that needed, because let's say that in walkthrough, a document can be given to the reviewer and they can just go through that. So no formal, or like there is no review meeting is required before that, or there is no prereqs for that. That's why it says individual preparation before the review meeting is optional. Review meeting is typically led by the author of the work product. So we already went through that who is author. So whatever the work product is in review, author of the work product basically leads that review meeting. In this type of review, walkthrough, scribe is mandatory. So now these are few things which you have to memorize for the review types, because maybe there would be a question that is scribe mandatory for in a walkthrough. So you need to memorize this. So a scribe is mandatory because we are having a review meeting. So of course we need someone to note down all the minutes. Use of checklist is optional. So over here, because walkthrough is not a very formal kind of process, so it's optional that whether we are using any kind of checklist or any kind of log forms, etc. May take the form of scenarios, dry runs, or simulations. Okay, so what are scenarios, dry runs, or simulations over here? So when we are walking through, let's say, a code, it can be, the work product can be a piece of code, and whoever is doing the walkthrough, most probably a developer, Then they are going through the code and they're doing kind of a dry run. They are going through the scenarios, all the steps which are mentioned in that code, and going through that code line by line, they can identify if there is any kind of defect, if there is any issue in the flow. The same applies to any kind of design document. That can be a walkthrough as well. So they can go through the scenarios, go through the control flow of that document and identify if there is anything which is not correct. Potential defect logs and review reports are produced. So over here, whatever the defects are identified in this review type needs to be logged, and review reports are produced. May vary in practice from quite informal to very formal. Okay, so usually walkthroughs, as the name says, is not very formal, but maybe in some cases it can be identified that yes, we have to do the walkthroughs in a formal manner. So that needs to be identified, that what's the intent of the formality of that review process. Next one is technical review. The main purpose of this type of review is gaining consensus, detecting potential defects. So of course, first of all, we are identifying the potential defects. And second one, if depending on what kind of defect is being identified, if it's a technical one, then that needs to be discussed, and maybe some strategy needs to be agreed on what kind of steps, new actions needs to be taken as a result of finding those defects. Possible further purposes: evaluating quality and building confidence in the work product, generating new ideas, motivating and enabling authors to improve future work products, considering alternative implementations. So when a technical review is done, then obviously confidence is gained, because now we know that it's technically correct, it's built correctly. And maybe during technical review, there would be some new ideas which are generated. And maybe even if we are not doing it for that project, but it can be taken into account for the new project, for the new work product. Next one is reviewers should be technical peers of the author and technical experts in the same or other disciplines. As we already saw, that reviewer can be someone who has the technical knowledge. So in that case, as the name says, the technical review needs to be done only who has the technical skills or the domain knowledge of that work product. Individual preparation before the review meeting is required. So in walkthrough, we said that it's optional, but over here we're saying that yeah, the individual preparation before the review meeting is required. So for example, if someone is doing a technical review, then they need to have some prereq as a knowledge, or maybe some documents which are given to them before the review starts or the review meeting starts, so that they are prepared with some kind of questions if they have. The next one is review meeting is optional. So it can be agreed whether do they need a review meeting or not. Ideally led by a trained facilitator, typically not the author. So facilitator, we read in the roles one, that is the moderator. So it can't be the author. So author and facilitator needs to be two different people. So an author can't be a facilitator, but review meeting over here is led by a trained facilitator. In walkthrough, we said review meeting is led by author of the work product, but in technical review is the facilitator. Then scribe is mandatory, ideally not the author. Again, the author shouldn't be the one who is the scribe, so which means that we do need someone who is scribe, but it's also then extending that statement that scribe doesn't have to be the author, it should be someone else. Use of checklist is optional. So again, over here also, it's optional. Potential defect logs and review reports are produced. Next one is inspection. So main purpose of inspection is detecting potential defects, evaluating quality and building confidence in the work product, preventing future similar defects through author learning and root cause analysis. So if we are choosing this kind of review, which is known as inspection, then in that case, mostly we are evaluating the quality of whatever the work product which is being reviewed. And then based on whatever the findings are, it can prevent the future similar defects through author learning and root cause analysis. So root cause analysis, which we covered in our initial sessions, that by analyzing the root cause of any kind of defect, it helps us to improve the next the future work products. Possible further purposes: motivating and enabling authors to improve future work products and the software development process, achieving consensus. So if inspection is done properly, and whatever the findings of this review process is, then it enables the authors to improve future work products. So for example, if inspection is done of requirements and there are some findings, then of course the author of that requirements will learn something from that and definitely will improve the future requirements. Follows a defined process with formal documented outputs based on rules and checklists. So inspection over here, then this means that it falls under the formal review, because we do have a defined process for this type of review, and there are formal documented outputs which are based on rules and checklist. Uses clearly defined roles which are mandatory and may include a dedicated reader. So who reads the work product aloud, often paraphrase, for example, describes it in own words during the review meeting. So in this meeting, whenever we have a review meeting for inspection, then the roles needs to be defined, which are mandatory, and additional to those roles which we already discussed, there might be an additional role as well of a dedicated reader who basically describes all the requirements or whatever the work products in their own words. Individual preparation before the meeting is required, obviously, because this is a formal review. So over here, we need to make sure that the individual who is preparing for the review is have all the details beforehand. Reviewers are either peers of the author or experts in other disciplines that are relevant to the work products. So whatever the work product is being inspected, the reviewers will be the peers of author or the experts in other disciplines, depending on what the work product is being reviewed. And the last one is inspection. Sorry, so we are continuing the inspection still. So there are a few more points. Specified entry and exit criteria are used. So over here, it's important that entry and exit criteria, whatever are specified, are being used. Scribe is mandatory in inspection review type. Review meeting is led by a trained facilitator, not the author. So just like technical review, inspection is also led by a trained facilitator. Author cannot act as the review leader, reader, or scribe. So we know that an author can not play any role, any of these roles in the review process. Potential defect logs and review report are produced. This is the same as the previous ones. Metrics are collected and used to improve the entire software development process, including the inspection process. So we are collecting, because this is more of a like a formal review process, so we are collecting metrics, and then we are using those metrics to improve the software development process, and not only the process, but also the inspection process as well, because maybe the way the inspection has been done, there might be some gaps identified, and next time maybe that process itself can be improved. Okay, so with that, we are done with all the review types. I know today there are lots of new things to absorb. There would be a lot to take in and a lot to memorize, but I hope that concept-wise it's clear and there are no issues. Of course, if there are any questions, we can go through that. Okay, so now we will go through some review techniques that we have gone through the review process, and then the types of reviews, and now what are the techniques which are used for reviewing. The first one is ad hoc. As the name says, that there is either little or no guidance. Then the document issues as found. So ad hoc is that a document is given to you and you are just going through it. You don't have any prior knowledge of that, or you don't have any set guidelines, and just going through that work product, and if you found any issues, then just document it. Need little preparation, because this is not a formal technique, so no prereqs required for that. Dependent on reviewer skills. So now this can be a negative thing for ad hoc technique, that it depends that who is doing this kind of review, who is doing an ad hoc review. If the reviewer is skilled, then maybe we can expect a good outcome. But if a reviewer who is not skilled enough, maybe we will not get a lot of benefit from this kind of technique. So whenever we are applying any kind of review techniques, it all depends that uh, who is doing that kind of review. Then duplicate issues. So as it's ad hoc, it's not very formal, then it might be that duplicate issues might occur because of this review technique. Then the next one is checklist based. So checklist is usually, there's like a set of, there's a document, and there's a set of questions, and whoever is doing the review are basically going through those questions. That usually checklists are used if we are doing any deployment. If there is any manual deployment, then there's a checklist that, okay, does this criteria met? Is the build number verified? And is the testing signed off? So these are like the set of questions. So this can be one review technique as well, checklist based. Detect issues based on given checklist. Consist of set of questions specific to type of work product. So whatever the work product which is being reviewed, of course, the checklist will be related to that. Systematic coverage. So in checklist, because checklist, the questions in that are already defined. So while defining those questions, this is being considered that there is a proper coverage to that work product. Should not fully depend on checklist to find defects. So whoever is using the checklist, it's good to go through the checklist, but it should be a minimum criteria, a minimum thing. It's not like the fully depend on that checklist. So maybe whoever is doing the review, if they found or they can identify something which is not in the checklist, then that should be communicated as well, and should not fully depend on the checklist to find defects. The next one is scenarios and dry runs. So whenever we are going through scenarios or dry runs, which means that we have a proper work product, like maybe code or maybe a flow diagram, etc. So we have some structured guidelines which supports dry runs. So in case if we are going through a piece of code, then we have a coding standard, let's say, in place, and we have some guidelines in that. So we know that which coding practices we need to make sure are in place when the code is reviewed. Better guidelines than checklists to identify defects. So if we compare this technique to checklist based, then there are better guidelines because we have structure in place. Though over here also there is a systematic coverage, but the guidelines are more supported over here. So there are better guidelines than checklist to identify defects. Should not be constrained to the given scenario. So just like in checklist based, yes, there are structured guidelines, but again, there can be some defects which can be identified outside of those given guidelines as well. So not like fully depend only on those guidelines. The next one is perspective based. Take on different stakeholder views. So if there are multiple team members from different domains, maybe a tester, developer, stakeholder, business analyst. So everyone have different view. So they have different perspectives. So perspective based is more depth. It goes into more depth and less duplication. Why in more depth? Because everyone is discussing or putting their own views on the table. So there is less chance of any kind of duplicate issues to be identified, because and they will be going into more depth of the review. Use work products to derive other work products. So what does that mean? That, for example, if the work product is a requirement, then those requirements can be used to derive other work products, for example, test cases. So we will use one product to derive other products. Effective for requirements and technical work products. So this kind of technique is useful for requirements. So if the work product is requirement, or if there is any other work product which is technical, then perspective based technique is a good one to choose. And the last one is role based. Perspective of stakeholders role. So over here we said that yes, we have different people from different different skills, but over here we are talking about again different stakeholders, but based on their role. So specific end user types and roles in organization. So over here, maybe over here the roles are not defined. It can be again that we are mixing maybe perspective based and role based together. That can be done as well. But over here is specifically about the end user types and the roles which are in the organization. Same rules apply as in perspective based, as roles are similar. So the roles which are part of this review technique, maybe they are the same people in the perspective based as well. So that's why in some cases, these both can be merged as well. So these are the high level review techniques which are being used for any kind of review process. Okay, now let's go through the success factors for reviews. So what is a successful review? A successful review is when we have organizational factors plus people related factors, both of them in place, then we can say that yes, we have a successful review. So we'll go through these two kinds of factors now in detail. Organizational factors. So organizational factors over here, each review has clear objectives defined during review planning and used as measurable exit criteria. Review types are applied which are suitable to achieve the objectives and are appropriate to the type and level of software products and participants. Any review techniques used, such as checklist-based or role-based reviewing, are suitable for effective defect identification in the work product to be reviewed. So if you notice, all of these are from organizational perspective. So these are all organizational factors which plays role in the success of a review. Any checklist which is used address the main risks and they are up to date. Large documents are written and reviewed in small chunks so that quality control is exercised by providing authors early and frequent feedback on defects. So if there are documents which are really are huge, then maybe they can be reviewed in small phases rather than that first we wait for those documents to be written and when they are finalized, only then everyone is reviewing. No, they can be reviewed in chunks as well, and maybe it will be good if some early feedback is being provided. Participants have adequate time to prepare. Reviews are scheduled with adequate notice. Management supports the review process, for example, by incorporating adequate time for review activities in project schedules. So management support is really needed because at one place we are seeing that reviews are scheduled with adequate notice and participants have adequate time to prepare. So management needs to make sure that everyone is getting this adequate time. Reviews are integrated in the company's quality or test policies. So whenever a company's quality or test policy is written, then these reviews are integrated in that because that plays a vital role in defining the test policy. So these are all organizational factors which acts as a success factor for review. The next ones are people-related factors. So we covered the organizational, now it's people-related factors. Okay, so in people-related factors, the right people are involved to meet the review objectives. For example, people with different skill sets or perspectives who may use the document as a work input. So it's important that we are involving the right people for reviewing. Testers are seen as valued reviewers who contribute to the review and learn about the work product, which enables them to prepare more effective tests and to prepare those tests earlier. So that's why testers are, it's very important that testers are part of the review so that they can learn and which helps them, and of course they can identify any kind of issues at that time as well, and it also helps them to prepare their test cases. Participants dedicate adequate time and attention to detail. Reviews are conducted on small chunks so that reviewers do not lose concentration during individual review or the review meeting when held. So whoever is doing the review, they are being allocated small chunks of the work product so they can concentrate on that. A culture of learning and process improvement is promoted. So if we are conducting any kind of review, whether formal or informal, one of the purposes that we are learning something from it and we are trying to improve the process. So that culture needs to be promoted over there. Continuing the people-related factors, defects found are acknowledged, appreciated, and handled objectively. The meeting is well managed so that participants consider it a valuable use of their time. So it's not that there are 5 people, they go in a meeting and the agenda is not there, which is specified, and maybe there is nothing useful agreed or discussed in that meeting. So the meeting needs to be very well managed because everyone is taking time out of their busy schedule to be part of that meeting. The review is conducted in an atmosphere of trust. The outcome will not be used for the evaluation of the participants. Okay, so again, there shouldn't be any kind of blame game that if there are any issues, then someone who is responsible for that shouldn't be criticized, because the purpose of doing the review is at the end improving the process, improving the product which is being developed. Participants avoid body language and behaviors that might indicate boredom, exasperation, or hostility to other participants. So yes, as most of the times, these kind of review meetings, depending on your schedule, might be not very important for specific people, and they just want to rush through it, and maybe their body language indicates that. So that's very important that no one feels annoyed in that meeting, and everyone is giving the attention in the meeting which is required. Adequate training is provided, especially for more formal review types such as inspections. A culture of learning and process improvement is promoted. So with that, we are done with the success factors for reviews, and we are done with today's session as well. So I know there was a lot to cover, and I would recommend that you go through the slides and the video recording at least once more after the session as well, because there is a lot which you might forget, which you need to memorize. So before we go on to the practice questions, if there are any questions, we can take them now. Jatin is asking, code review comes under static testing. That's right, Jatin, because code review, of course, we have to do the code review either manually or if we are using any kind of static analysis tool. But code review, usually what a developer is doing, they are doing the review of the code of another developer. Or maybe sometimes if we are using any kind of repository, code repository like GitHub, if there are 4 developers, then maybe one senior developer is doing the code review before they commit their code in the code repository. So yeah, that comes under static testing. Okay, Alex is asking, you mentioned test policy in the organizational factor. What is the difference between test strategy and test approach? Okay, so Alex, if you would have gone through our earlier session, so we did discuss the test strategy, test policies, approach, etc. a couple of times. But yes, I can definitely go through it once again. So test strategy is a company level document in which whatever kind of testing is being done is specified. That what kind of, let's say that in this company, uh, in one company, we are performing functional testing and we are using these tools. We are doing automated regression testing. We are using this framework. Then we also do non-functional testing. So all those things which are tools or skills which are being used in that company are identified in test strategy, and test strategy is always a company level document. If you talk about test approach, then test approach comes under test planning. So over here in test strategy, we have identified everything, whatever kind of testing we are doing. But then let's say that we have to write a test plan for a specific project. Then we will see that from this test strategy, what kind of things apply to that specific project. And so then we define the test approach for a project. So test approach will be different for each project, while the test strategy for the company would be the same. So I hope it's clear. Vineet is saying static testing mainly done on documentation part only. So Vineet, mostly yes, but as we just mentioned, that code review also comes under static testing. So so of course, if you see from developers perspective, yes, that's also kind of document. Code is also kind of document, but now this is kind of static testing which everyone can't do. So a developer can only do the code review. So yes, mainly I would agree that it's done on documentation, but it can be done on any kind of work product, depending on what kind of projects you are working on, because it can be done on any design on the schema of the database as well. So though it's usually related with the documentation, but practically it can be done on any kind of work product. So Vineet, you are saying dynamic on coding. No, that would be different. Okay, so now we have to first of all see that what are we trying to understand, like what is dynamic. Dynamic is something where you execute the code. So execute the code means that you are um, running something to running a product to identify, like you are running an application and then you are doing the validation over here. Yes, if you see the coding from that part, that we are running the code and then we are doing the dynamic testing, that's different. That will but over here we are talking more about debugging. So when maybe a developer is doing debugging, or they're not even debugging, they are just going through the code. Maybe they can just take a printout of the code and just go through the code one by one, doing a dry run just to see that whether anything makes place or makes sense or no. So it's so we can't say that reviewing the code is dynamic. It comes still under static testing. I hope this is clear, or maybe I haven't understood your point. In that case, do let me know. Okay, Gaurav is saying in earlier sessions, we learned that we have to be assertive while reporting bugs and communicate effectively. But what about the situation when developers feel offended for the bugs? Okay, Gaurav, I understand that this does happen in practical life a lot, but it depends that like how it's they are being communicated. Like for example, if you're working in a team where you are a team member, and in the same team developer is also part of that team. So if there is any bug, then which is maybe you know that who has caused that bug, and of course because you know, that's why you will go and you will speak to that developer. So it's really important that how you are communicating. There can be multiple ways. Sometimes testers raise the bugs in a meeting, and in that meeting, because there are other participants as well, so developer definitely will feel offended. If I'm a developer, then I will feel offended as well, because the same tester could have come like just to me earlier as well, and discuss that or raise it with me rather than raising it in the meeting. If the bugs need to be raised in the meeting, then maybe not specify the developer, or maybe just try to cover it in a way that during testing, 5 defects were identified, 2 were high, 2 were low, 1 was medium. And everyone would be sensible enough in the meeting not to ask, not to raise this, that who actually caused that bug. So there are different ways you can communicate that bug, or maybe you can just go to that developer and say that, oh, I thought it should be like this, but maybe I'm not able to understand the requirement properly. Can you please explain? And yes, in that way, if the developer is going through it, maybe developer then realize himself that, oh yes, it's a mistake at my part. So whenever the bugs are raised, it needs to be very clear that everyone is doing their part. Developers are doing their job and testers are doing their job. So they are two different roles rather than uh, uh, two different individuals. So we are doing the job as per our role. So if we just take care of that, I think everyone should be fine. Okay, so Vineet is saying it's clear, that's good. So Alex, it's clear to you as well, that's good. So Gaurav is asking, static testing is mainly practiced at project level by tester? No, Gaurav, it doesn't have to be tester. It can be anyone. So let's say if it depends, like now what the work product is. Work product can be requirements. So yes, if we talk about requirements, then maybe a tester can be the reviewer, or maybe developer can be reviewer as well, because many times when we discuss the requirements, developer and tester are there, and then anyone can raise any issues when they hear the requirements that, oh, it doesn't make any sense. Because what's happening that when we are listening the requirements, a tester is thinking of the test cases they will build from that requirements, while the developer is thinking of the flow of the code how they will write the code. So anyone can come up with any kind of issues in that work product. The same is with any kind of, let's say the work product is any legal document, then neither developer or tester are the eligible people to review that. Then maybe someone else in the business has to go through that kind of document. And then again, the code, as we just said, that the code needs to be reviewed by another developer. So it depends that what kind of work products need to be tested under static testing. So I hope that's clear. So Gaurav is saying, then when should static testing should be practiced? The starting of project or in the Scrum cycle? Okay, so static testing, now you have mentioned two things, starting of project or in the Scrum cycle. Yes, if you are doing Scrum, if you're doing Agile, then it will be done in the beginning. So first of all, we already know that in Scrum, we can't do formal process. We don't have time for that. So it will be more of an informal process. So answering your question, for a Scrum, whenever you are doing the sprint planning meeting, or you are doing the grooming of backlog, you have these two instances where you can perform these kind of reviews. So when you are going through the backlog, so you are gaining more understanding of what's coming in the next sprint, and maybe before the sprint meeting you can have some meetings with the BA, and you can ask any questions, so that in sprint planning meeting you are prepared and you can ask more questions. And based on the discussion, sprint planning meeting is kind of an informal review. So yes, if you are doing Scrum cycle, then that's the time where this will be done. But then this is only the review of the requirements at that time. But let's say that we are talking about the code review as well. Code is not developed at that time, so that wouldn't be done at that time. It will be when, as the code is being developed, so it will be reviewed every time a developer needs to commit the code into the code repository. So over here also, we can't say that static testing needs to be done at one place. It depends again then what kind of work product is there. Maybe there is a regulatory document. Again, we can take that as an example, and maybe while the review sprint planning meeting is done, there can be one user story for that, but that can be done in parallel by someone else who is not actually part of the team, because maybe there is a risk team who is going through those those standard documents. They have to review the documents, so that activity can be done in parallel as well, or maybe till the end of development. So depends on the work product. Right. Gaurav, it's clear. So that's good, Gaurav. I'm glad that it's clear. Right. Okay. So let's go through the practice questions. So the first one is, who leads a walkthrough? So let's see how many of you remember. Okay, Gaurav is saying B, Jatin A, Alex A, V A, Madhuri D. Okay, so the correct answer is A. So an author leads a walkthrough. So it's okay. You can again go through the slides, and you have, that's why I was saying that you have to go through the slides to just memorize these key things. Okay, so one thing, Madhuri, you mentioned scribe. So scribe is someone who actually takes the notes and who logs the things. So a scribe, it will be very rare that scribe will lead any kind of review activity. Okay, next one, which is not a type of review. Okay, Jatin is saying D, UVD. Gaurav is saying D as well. Madhuri D. Yes, and D is the right answer, requirement analysis. Why? Because A, B, and C, all these options are type of review, but requirement analysis is basically a work product. So that's right. Alex has also said D, so Alex, that's the right answer. And the last question is, who leads a formal review process? So when we talk about formal review process, so it's more of like inspection. So who leads a formal review process? Okay, we have got one answer so far. So Alex is saying B, moderator, which is the correct answer. So moderator or a facilitator is the one who leads a formal review. So sometimes, of course, first of all, you need to memorize all these things. And let's say if there's a question and you don't remember at that time, just go through the options and try to eliminate the one which definitely you know that this is not the correct one, because that is a good way to identify the most potential, like probably the right answer, because if you are eliminating, then you are reducing the options for you. So in this way, who leads a formal review process, you don't remember, then what you can do, first of all, we know that scribe definitely can't be a lead. Scribe doesn't lead any formal review process, so we can eliminate this option. Then again, reviewer is the one who is reviewing it, so it's not likely that a reviewer will leading a formal review process. So then we are left with two options, and then we can decide that, okay, that which looks more possible answer. So that would be a good approach to use for any kind of question in your exam, which you are a bit not sure about. Okay, so with this then, we are done with today's session. If there is any other question, let me know. Otherwise, we can end the session here. Okay, there are no more questions. So thank you so much, everyone, for being patient on this session, because this was a quite lengthy one and there was a lot to go through. So please take your time to go through the video recording or the slides after this. And if you have any question, if something is not clear, please let me know and I'll come back to you. So I'll see you next week on Tuesday. Until then, take good care of yourself. Bye.